Hi there, I'm Dr. Emma DeMarco, and this is the Unmusical Podcast. Today's episode is with Australian percussionist and highly awarded performer, Claire Edwardes. So I'd really love to point out that when I was researching you, your bio online started with from the set of Play School to the main stage of the Sydney Opera House, which I think is maybe the best intro to a bio I've ever seen. I love it. It's so different and fascinating. Could you tell me a little bit about your career, Claire?
Oh, goodness. Where do I start? I mean, I have hosted Play School. And I have played on the main stage of the Sydney Opera House concertos with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, and I've done, I've had the opportunity to do some amazing things around the world. And I probably one of the highlights, I guess, was doing a concerto in the Concertgebouw, in the main hall of the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam, walking down those red steps at the back. You see and knew of those as you were growing up, and then to actually do it and then be so paranoid that you might trip over. That was pretty amazing. But, it's more probably about all the different people that I've gotten to play with over my career and how that's also kind of like, formed me as a musician and as a person. And I think that's probably the part of my career that I feel most fortunate about, really.
Oh, wow. Very impressive. And being a percussionist, I sort of wondered as I was preparing the interview, do people really know what your day on a plate looks like? Do they know what sort of instruments you're playing and that sort of thing?
No, I mean, most people don't even know what percussion is, really. And the other day I was playing a little solo piece at the Australian Festival of Chamber Music, and I was introducing it, and I thought, what the heck, I'll tell them my line, which is that I hit things for a living, and everyone laughs, of course. And of course it's funny, but it's also kind of true. And it's like, well, that's what I do. I'm a percussionist, and I was recently on online dating of all things, and trying to explain to people who aren't musicians what I do is, it's very difficult. And because it's so niche, it's kind of it's a challenge, and sometimes you feel like a novelty act, especially at like a classical music festival. But the thing is, I guess I'm so passionate about bringing the music that I champion to new audiences who haven't heard of it. I have the patience to kind of go there and explain what it is to be a percussionist and explain, why I'm so passionate about playing new music.
Wow, yeah. Do you have particular percussion instruments that you've felt you've had to know in order to succeed, or that you think are kind of the staples? Or is there really room for percussionists to kind of have an area or an instrument in particular that they want to be their thing or their focus?
In Australia, you can't be too specialist. I mean, most percussionists wouldn't be too specialist because there's just not the work to kind of only specialise in one thing. Like in Japan and even in America, some people are just marimba players, whereas in Australia, you would never make a living just playing marimba. That said, I play quite a lot of marimba, and I probably play more marimba than most percussionists. And marimba is a really hard instrument that you only play well if you're practicing it and you're playing it a lot. Like, it's not like a lot of other percussion, you can just you use the same technique and you pick it up and it's fine, whatever. But marimba's a bit different. So I kind of like the challenge of a marimba, and sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, it's a 5-octave marimba is really hard, but then I figure, well, no one else is playing it as much as me. So, I mean, in Australia, there are millions of students around the world who are so good at marimba these days, and I'm sure I'm nowhere near as technically proficient as them anymore. But I love playing it. So, and I think, I'm reasonably good at it, so it's okay.
A little more than reasonably, but okay. being a saxophone player? Because I feel like that's a question I get asked a lot of, which saxophone is your main one? But you've touched on something really important there, which is in Australia, you kind of need to be able to do a little of everything. The opportunities dictate that you have to be a bit versatile as a musician. And so has that something that you've found in the Australian scene that and maybe you've encouraged other younger players coming through to build their versatility and their ability to do lots of different things?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely be more versatile, and I wish I was. Like, I could play the drum kit better and I could play hand drums better, and it's sort of like how much time or how far out of the kind of core of classical percussion do we want to go, or do we have the time to go?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the same with saxophone. I'm assuming it is, that the technique on all those saxophones is basically the same, and it's just the control, obviously, on a soprano versus a baritone is going to be different because one's much smaller. But the thing with percussion that I guess I always kind of push with students or people who I'm, doing classes with or whatever is, and this was the same with me, I mean, the main thing is you just have to get your kind of like basic technique on a certain range of instruments really proficient, and then you can do most things, or you can at least pretend to do most things. And, sometimes it is a bit of pretending and making it up. But, like you get taught timpani, which is weird because that becomes a separate job, like in the professional orchestra world. But like, for example, this week I still have to play timpani in a Peter and the Wolf arrangement. So it's like, well, lucky I know how to play the timpani because it is a different technique to all the other percussion instruments.
Yeah, I see.
And then we have snare drum, which feeds into every single non-mallet instrument. So your snare drum technique is your technique with double strokes and all the control element, like playing soft and getting a good sound. Like I knew I wasn't going to be a snare drum player in an orchestra, but I still worked with my teacher in Holland, Jan Pustjens, for like 2 years as a postgraduate student to be a better snare drum player, so that because I knew that would feed into my, well, we call it multi-percussion, so anything that's not mallets. So in a concerto, like I often have to switch between like 4 mallets on marimba and vibraphone and then just normal kind of snare drum technique on my multi-percussion setup. So that's a very normal thing, and I guess that's the versatility, that's kind of the extent of the versatility that I generally need. But, younger people, it's harder to find work because you don't have the kind of experience that I have and the name that I have. So I would always encourage younger people to be as versatile as they can.
Yeah, amazing. And one thing that I was very interested to see when I was looking you up a little bit is you have signature mallets, which sounds like the coolest thing ever. Like I can't even really think of a saxophone equivalent of maybe signature reeds, but that doesn't really work that way. Can you tell me about that opportunity? And also, what are your signature mallets? How did you create them?
Well, it was funny actually because I was... No one really plays with them, okay? So let's just put that right out there. And the other day I was at a Synergy concert and I saw Alison Pratt playing and I was like, I think she has a whole stick tray of my signature mallets. I was like, I never see that. So then I went up and I took a photo. I was like, yes, they're my Claire Edwardes mallets. That's hilarious. And then... but then I was talking to Daryl, her partner, Daryl Pratt, who is my old teacher. And I said, oh, my God, Alison was using my mallets. And he said, oh, yeah, I don't know where I got them from, but I think it was from the con. And I'm like, oh, you took the mallets I left there for the students. And that's how they ended up, that she was using them in the concert. So that's how... No one has those mallets, really. But anyway, for me, they ended up a bit too heavy and I don't use them much. I'll probably use them next week in this concerto I have with the Tasmanian Symphony Orchestra. But it was really challenging trying to make mallets, like with a company in America so I couldn't go to the factory or anything. And, I mean, the reason why we decided to try and do it was that I felt like Mike Bolter, this mallet company, I was endorsed by them, and I used all their vibraphone mallets, and I was like, you guys need to work on getting some better marimba mallets, like maybe we should work together. So that's how it happened, but it was kind of a frustrating process. Like, they spelt my name wrong on one of the iterations, like EDWAIDS, and so they're like, you know, they're really into me.
Yeah, they're limited edition now, aren't they?
Yeah, totally. Anyway, so the mallet thing was, it was kind of a fun little ego boost, I guess, but not something that I really feel changed the world, I guess.
Oh, look, I think endorsements is something that a lot of young musicians look up to and are aiming for, particularly in kind of this social media world that we live in environment. You know, I'm an Daddario artist myself, and that felt like a big kind of milestone in my career of having someone reach out. How have endorsement opportunities kind of come your way or impacted your career? And, you know, how do you talk to younger players about potential endorsement opportunities in a performance career?
So, yeah, with endorsements, like I was saying, I think of, like, you have to think of yourself as a brand in a way when you play an unusual instrument and you're not planning on joining an orchestra, so that, you know, you and me are the same in that way. But endorsements is kind of more stuff that I fell into. Like, a lot of other percussionists are like got the cymbal endorsements and the snare drum endorsements and stuff, and it's not really something that I was ever really like cared about that much. I mean, I think of myself as a musician, not a percussionist, and all the way I think about music is taking the inspiration from how other instruments make their sound, not trying to be sounding like a percussionist. So I'm not one of those nerdy percussionists who's really obsessed with like drum heads and sticks, and like I just use whatever feels like it's going to get me the sound that I need or the effect that I need, and that's all I really care about. But I think what I have been successful with is more things like, for example, like leveraging recording opportunities in a planned way. Like, I mean, it's less so now, I guess, because CDs are kind of gone out of vogue. But during my career, I sort of made these decisions to record and do commissioning projects of, for example, certain length pieces, which I knew would probably be played on air on ABC Classic at drive time or whatever. And that was a very conscious move on my part to sort of like try and get radio play, because I knew that if I didn't do that, they're never going to play like a 12-minute difficult marimba solo that only percussionists know. Like, that's never going to happen. And it sort of went hand in hand with my kind of championing of Australian composers more broadly. And so I was able to use my kind of commissioning hat and the creation of new music, and then actually think, okay, well, how can that actually like feed into, you know, my brand and people knowing me and what I do, you know. So it's good to sort of think about things strategically in that way, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, new music has been such a big career and such a big part of everything that you do. Was it, I was curious because I think as saxophone players, we love new music as well, but partly because I think we have a bit of an inferiority complex for like not having a Mozart concerto and all the other winds do. So we kind of build up our repertoire. And I think for percussion, is an interest in music something that came because you're a percussionist, or is just incidental? You were a percussionist and you love new music. Like, how did that kind of chicken and egg situation work for you?
I mean, it's kind of hard to say now. Like, I grew up as a pianist, and I remember I did all the classics like Bach and Beethoven and Chopin and all the romantic composers, and I got to a very high level. But I do remember she made me do Bartók Microcosmos, like from an early age right to the end of those books. And I remember always I had some sort of like connection with those more syncopated rhythms, and the fact that the tonality was like quite edgy, actually, quite a lot in those pieces by Bartók. And it wasn't really anything I reflected on at the time, but just when I look back and I realised, okay, well, then I went to the con and I chose percussion, but I still erred towards the much more tonal and predictable repertoire, I guess, in the beginning, because that's what I was used to playing as a pianist. And then just gradually, I guess also because of my personality, I sort of don't like just following norms or doing the same thing as other people. So I was always looking for like other repertoire in the percussion world that my colleagues weren't playing, for example. So we didn't have the internet then. So I'd spend ages in the library or like at, music centres, finding out music centres from around the world if they had other ideas for repertoire. So that was something that I was always interested in. And then kind of concurrently, I was asked to be in this thing called the Sydney Spring Festival with the composers Damien Ricketson and Matthew Shlomowitz, which was actually the start of the Spring Ensemble, and now that's Ensemble Offspring. So that was 27 years ago, and that I was involved in that first concert. And, it was pretty freaking random. Like the lineup was random. I remember there was like 3 trombones and 2 percussionists and like 3 saxophones, because there were so many saxophone players who were interested in new music. And then I think I just really liked the experience of like feeding into a new composition and the fact that I was working with like people who had created it, and then I could influence it. And I'm a very social person as well, so I loved the kind of like people aspect of it. So, and then I guess that just makes sense that I sort of went, okay, well, yeah, why would I play transcriptions? I mean, that was something that I never really endorsed. Played a few Bach transcriptions, but it just didn't make sense to me. Like, why would I be looking backwards all the time? I want to look forwards, and I want to create music with composers that's new.
Yeah, amazing. Have you faced any particular challenges along the way? I can imagine sort of funding might have been an issue, or maybe support for different venues or getting it up and running.
Yeah, all the time. It's pretty much my bread and butter, challenges. I mean, I guess that's the other reason why I do it, right? Like, I could have an easy life in a job, like a job that was funded by someone else that I didn't have to worry about finding the money. But I chose not to do that. And it can be really hard sometimes, and it still is, like now, trying to get the funding for Ensemble Offspring. It's really, if you think about it too much, you get really depressed, because it's like, how can the government give so little investment to what we're doing that, I mean, I think it's really important, but of course I do, because I lead the charge. But I know millions of composers around Australia also think it's important, and our audiences love it too. But this music is not going to happen without government money, like, or private donations. Like, that's just the basic law of ticket sales. No one is, not no one, but new audiences are not forthcoming the way they are for Mozart or Bach. So, that's just the reality that we're kind of operating in. And hopefully, like, me and my brand and the brand of the ensemble and the musicians in it, definitely, like, that helps, because people start to know me and know us, and that's great. But it's very slow, like, it's very incremental. So we don't have the sort of support that an early music ensemble has, because early music is easy to listen to and you know what you're going to get. And it makes so much sense that, people want to hear Vivaldi Four Seasons over and over again. I mean, most people do. I don't. That's why I do what I do. But most people do. And they just, that's the status quo and that's what they want. And so I sort of see, like, my role to just, like, mix things up a bit and just, like, make a bit of, just mess it up for people. And hopefully there's enough curious, kind of minded and curious listeners who just want to come along on the ride with us as well,
Yes, of course. And then with your experiences, looking for funding models or private donations and that sort of things, was that something you felt prepared for when you kind of went on this journey in your career, or did you had to learn it along the way?
No, yeah, not at all. I mean, you don't get taught that. And that's why we have our Hatched Academy and we have our mentorship program, because what I've realized when I have these one-on-one conversations with, people your age who are just trying to get all this stuff happening for themselves, like they didn't even learn it at ANAM, I don't understand, why is there no course at ANAM that teaches you where to get money, how to deal with private donors, how to market your product, all those things. It's quite big, and yes, I've learnt it on the job, but I'm 47 now, so that's a long time of doing it. And you have to remain live and agile, and, things change all the time, of course. And government funding gets less and less. That's also the reality of the situation. But no, I did not learn. But I'm here to help other people. I feel that's really important, to be generous with my time, so that younger emerging artists have some sort of a chance in this kind of awful competitive situation that we're put in by the Australia Council, which is now called Creative Australia, whereby we're all competing against each other. That's not right.
Yeah.
So, because of course I'm going to trump a young person who's never done an application before, because I kind of know how the process works, So it is a learned process for sure.
And it must be, I guess, interesting coming in with track record versus someone who may have a great project just as worthy. And the only thing is they are younger. They just don't have a track record yet. And this would help them get a track record to then have a track record to attract more funding. Yeah, it's a bit of a cycle there.
Yeah. There's just not enough money, and as long as there's not enough money, there's not going to be like separated streams so that people aren't competing. I mean, I think there should be separate streams, but you've got to be creative, and creative is called finding rich people. I know it sounds awful, but it's kind of that's what the government is trying to do, right? They're trying to push us towards that model, more like America, because they know that, there's a finite amount of money, and
try something else. Interesting. Very interesting. So your project Rhythms of Change came out when I was looking into your new music, and it sounded amazing to me. I was very excited by it. Australian female composers, and a focus on music for students. Is that right?
So I just wanted the new commissions, which the idea behind it was that even in my repertoire, I just didn't have enough pieces by female composers, and especially Australian female composers. So I wanted to just sort of like, bam, contribute to the repertoire in like one full swoop. So 10 new pieces or whatever it ended up being. And but what I didn't want was to create a whole raft of like virtuosically difficult music that composers often write for me because they know I like a challenge and I'm up for it, But I wanted very specifically for it to be idiomatic, but not by percussionists. So idiomatic enough that, a high school student or an early tertiary student could play it. And I think in the most part we achieved that. Like, it was a lot of work working with the composers and vetting their scores and deleting notes, and, because when they're not percussionists, of course, they don't understand the instruments as well. And, but I'm very kind of committed to helping non-percussionist composers write better for the instrument as well.
Yeah. And so have you seen sort of the fruit of those labors? Have you seen students doing them, or like how have those pieces sort of made their way into the world?
Bits and pieces. I mean, I would like more people to be playing the pieces. I think it's hard to communicate with everyone, like that the music's out there, and I think it happens kind of over time in the end, gradually. So all I can do is like provide the portfolio of repertoire and videos and recordings and get it on the radio and do all the things and play it myself in concert. And then further than that, like, people have to be looking for that repertoire, I guess, on the AMC website or whatever, or hopefully they come across it online. And then it just starts to kind of, take some speed. But I think right now it's still quite new, and so I haven't really seen, I mean, some con students have played some of the pieces, but yeah.
It's starting to build out. Well, maybe we can put some links in the description of this.
Yeah.
To get
There's some really good pieces. Very
man.
fun as well. Yeah.
And you said you wanted it to be really idiomatic for the instrument. How do you get composers to that place of writing, something that feels so nice on your instrument? Because I know what I do for saxophone, but I feel like it's going to be a very, very different process for percussion.
I mean, I made, also during that same time, during COVID lockdowns, I made this thing called the Australian Marimba Composition Kit. And that was also through funding from the Australia Council. And so the idea with that was that without me having to reinvent the wheel every time, I could just sort of send someone this video and this PDF, which you can download on my website, and then they would hopefully be able to sort of teach themselves like 101, like writing for marimba, because it doesn't get included, probably like saxophone, in a lot of orchestral, like orchestration classes. So it's sort of working, like people have to be bothered to read the whole thing or watch the whole thing. And I think I get it. I just think most composers just want to get on with the act of writing, and they don't want to bother themselves too much with like doing, this thing I say where you go on the piano and check. No one wants to check, but for my project, or if they work with me, of course I make them check. But there's amazing, like, how many times I've worked with younger composers to start writing a piece. I'm like, did you read the kit? Like, and did you check it? And they're like, oh, no, I'm hoping you can just play it. And I'm like, no, but that's why I made the kit, because I know I can't just play it, because you're writing for marimba like it's a piano, and we don't have 5 sticks in each hand, So that's kind of what I'm up against. Also, just the sheer kind of like physical distance that you have to cover on the marimba that most composers don't really have a concept of.
I guess, there's a physicality of where you need to move between the 5 octaves that I certainly didn't think of until just then. If I was writing, of course, if you want to jump between octaves, it's not, for me, I just whack on an octave key. For you, you're taking 3 steps away.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is complex. Like, I don't think it's easy writing for the marimba if you don't play marimba, basically. But then Anne Cause just wrote me a marimba concerto for the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, which I premiered a couple of weeks ago. And we worked very closely together. I mean, the reason why I asked her to write it was because she was part of this Rhythms of Change project, and I felt like the pieces that she just provided me with before I had to tell her what to change were very idiomatic in that first instance, and we had a very good working relationship. So I was like, hey, I want you to write me a marimba concerto. This is going to be the first, like, proper Australian marimba concerto. Yeah. Which I think it is. Wait, I'm just thinking. Yeah, I think, it's amazing. Like, it's worked out so well, and it is idiomatic. I mean, yes, I had to get rid of quite a few notes in certain places to make it more playable, and we're still kind of honing the final version. We're going to do a wind band version, so I can play it with some wind bands, and I just think, it is possible, but you've got to have someone who's really willing to like take on board my feedback in a really kind of open way where they don't get offended and stuff.
Yeah, I think that touches on sort of, I've experienced 2 types of composers in my day, where there's composers that are looking to create something where I'm just the vessel for their intention. I'm the vessel for their sound that they have in And then there's other composers where they're looking for each performer to put their own stamp on it, and they're excited by the ideas of, you know, what each performer could do with it, or how I could take the piece that they've written and create it in some different way. Have you experienced any other types of composers? Have you experienced that same thing? What's that process collaborating like for you?
I mean, I've experienced every type of composer. I'm working with them constantly, all the time.
Yeah.
No one's the same. No one has the same process. You know, I've experimented with lots of different ways of doing it, like giving them a brief or not giving them a brief, you know. So there's kind of like a gamut of ways that, you know, you could say, the brief could be around the instrumentation, like it was for Rhythms of Change, or like level, you know, how hard it has to be. That was my brief for Rhythms of Change, and also that I wanted it to be fun. But then with Ensemble Offspring, often the brief is like around a theme, or a piece is like, just we did Incredible Floridas by Richard Mille, and so the two composers who we commissioned for that was sort of like, we want you to write a piece that is in response to that. It doesn't have to sound like it or anything, but it just, something about that piece you need to use as your kind of inspiration. And that, I mean, weirdly enough, you can end up like, it's fine for marketing copy because you say, well, that piece is related, but most of the time it's just got nothing to do with it. And that's fine because it's their aesthetic choice. Like, I don't want to be controlling that, you know. And the more they're open to like working with us and using our skills to take on board, like through a workshop process, the better the piece is always going to be. But there's still quite a few composers who it doesn't suit them to work that way. They don't want to work that way, and they just want to provide you with a score and go, you know. So there are so many different styles of composers that I've come across over my career. And I guess where it gets a little bit grey is the ones who are writing a more free score approach. And it's like, well, wait, who wrote this piece, you know? Because if you're improvising and they just gave you 3 words and that's their score, then it's kind of like, but, you know, the system's not really set up for performers to be acknowledged in that way currently. And the way I see that is I don't get my knickers in a knot about it. I'm like, well, you know, I decided to do this as my career path. I have other perks. Composers don't have an easy life either. So if they're going to get the whatever money from calling it theirs, then great, good for them. You know, like, I'm not precious about that.
Yeah. And I think there's some great opportunities for performers and composers to work together in, you know, income generation, whether it's particularly for younger players. You know, I often talk to younger students about making friends with composers and finding ways to say, all right, if you're able to write this for me, I might find this performance opportunity where another player might see it. We could make a recording together and pitch that to a publishing company. I think there's a lot of ways of kind of, particularly at lower levels, kind of creating opportunities for each other and collaborating so that the music comes about, so the music is heard. It can be kind of an exciting process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'm sure young people are much more creative with that stuff than me and know how it all works. I mean, the older generation like mine now, can't believe I'm calling myself older generation, but you know what I mean. Basically, you know, we grew up in a time where the ABC would pay you $850 to record your concert.
Wow.
And then they took all the rights. And it's still the same now with like a concerto recording. Like, it's just in my contract that the ABC is going to record it. And if they use it for like a theme tune for their afternoon concerts, which is exactly what happened for Ian Grandage's concerto, they used the very end of that. I don't think he got any money, and I certainly didn't get any money as the performer. So I think as the performer, it's much less likely that we'll ever make money out of recordings, especially in this day and age. Like, I'm just, maybe call me cynical, but, you know, so many people say to us with Ensemble Offspring, oh, have you guys ever thought of like doing movie music?
Really?
Like, What is it that you don't understand about how this system works? Like, if a composer writes it and we get booked to record it, great, but we just got whatever, $500 for that recording session, and that's where it ends. Whereas the composer is obviously going to get the royalties. That's how the system works, you know. So people don't tend to understand that if you're not the creator, you're not going to get royalties, and that is how the system works currently, I would say.
I mean, do you guys have streaming for anything, or Spotify, Apple Music, anything like that?
Yeah, we're on all that stuff, but no one who makes money in niche contemporary classical music. I mean, I've never seen a cent.
Oh no!
I mean, so I don't mean to sound cynical, but I do not record for money. No way. I mean, I have actually sold quite a few of my Rhythms of Change physical CDs. Like, weirdly enough, I've sold a lot, but I haven't made any money off any of the streaming, and and Ensemble Offspring doesn't make any money from any of our streaming. Wow. But that's just how the system is. I mean,
yeah.
That's not why I do it. I do it because I think it's really important to document this music that we are co-creating with composers. And I think it's important for the Australian music scene and the composers to have that music readily available if someone wants to play it or program it or listen to it or whatever. And that's why I do it. I do never have done it to make money.
Yeah, I think you say it's cynical, but it is a little bit of a reality. And I think that's important for our audiences to know, for younger musicians to know, and just to have those conversations. Because I definitely think there can be a little bit of an impression maybe coming from social media that, you know, recordings do pay really well, and creating these recordings and these products might be great and you're all set. You know, I've gotten messages on my social media being like, oh, you're in a video with 2 sets, so you're raking it in, right? And it's like, no, I just did a video with my mates. Like, I haven't seen any money from that. And so there's these impressions that build up, or stereotypes or expectations, that I think it's good to unpack about what is it like to be a classical musician.
Yeah. And of course, I'm talking about like my niche, like musical output. Like, I'm not playing Bach. I'm not playing Four Seasons. Yeah. If I was playing that, and I'd done some arrangement of Vivaldi's Four Seasons and it had my name on it, then I'd be making money. Like Max Richter, he's making money, you know, and probably the groups that have recorded that are also getting download money, because there would be a lot of people downloading that. But the stuff that we do, no.
Yeah.
It's just the numbers are not there.
Yeah. Okay. And so we've already talked a little bit about Ensemble Offspring, but I'd love to just dive right in, because obviously you are a very highly established and very, very successful contemporary music ensemble in the Australian landscape. Could you tell me a little bit more about that story of you guys starting out?
Yeah, well, we were asked by Roger Woodward to play at his Sydney Spring Festival, which was actually at the ABC at the Eugene Goosens Hall in Sydney. And I think I was in second year at the con, and so Damien and Matt used it as their kind of final recital. So we were playing pieces by them, but we also played some Xenakis, I think, and I can't even remember who else. And then it sort of just, so then it was third year, we did it again, and then there was like amazing composers came out, like Donatoni, and you know, like he had famous composers coming out. I never met Xenakis, unfortunately. I think he came out before I started at the con. And we just kind of kept building on it, you know, like for me, every September, that's when it was the time that we were like just practicing our little butts off, learning all this amazing like new music. So the classics, and new works by like composers from the con. And so it was and you know, we're playing alongside our teachers like Stephanie McCallum and Daryl Pratt, and it was just great, sort of like a really fast and immersive way of sort of cutting your teeth on new music. And I guess I fell in love with it. And Matt went to live in America to study with Brian Fernyhough, and Damien stayed in Australia and just kept it going, but kind of ad hoc, you know, like just project based, you know, whatever money he could get from Create New South Wales or whatever to do concert at church. And he kept it going. And I went to Holland to study, and I sort of stayed in touch. I came back and I did a kind of like solo-y feature show, and then they kept playing, like they did glass arrangements and lots of different cool projects. A thing called Parch's Bastards, where they had like instruments made. Harry Parch is the inspiration for that show. So they were doing really cool stuff. And when I came back in 2006, I was like, oh, you know, I want to do my own new music ensemble, because I'd had a percussion ensemble in Holland, percussion duo, sorry. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to start my own like new music ensemble to kind of like be against Ensemble Offspring when I'm already in that ensemble. And so I just offered to help Damien, and then sort of one thing led to another in terms of like, okay, we need a board, we need to make this more professional if we're going to like get proper ongoing funding. And it sort of just, I mean, for us it was very gradual, whereas if you started now, you would probably just do it, you would organize yourself better and just do it like, okay, we need a board, oh, we need a DGR status so that we can accept donations. For us, that all happened very slowly. This kind of realization that Damien was never very keen on like getting funding from private donors, and that's only something that has become, you know, much more of the norm in the last kind of 10 to 15 years. So yeah, we did that all gradually, and then eventually Damien sort of decided that he just wanted to focus on his teaching at the con, and he'd sort of committed enough of his life to Ensemble Offspring in a majority unpaid kind of artistic director situation.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky that since I took over as sole artistic director, because we were co-artistic directors for quite a while, and when I took over as sole artistic director, we had 4-year funding from the Australia Council and Create New South Wales. So I've been able to have a salary for the last, I don't know, like almost 10 years, which is amazing. I mean, before that, we were very much unpaid, just doing it because we loved it. And now, of course, you know, we're in our late 40s, all the musicians, we need to be paid properly. We've got mortgages and families, and it's our livelihood. So, you know, there is no other option. You're not going to be doing it if you're not getting paid properly. And our musicians are like, you know, the best in the country. So you've got to pay them at that kind of the highest that we can afford, basically. Yeah, so that's stressful because that's a lot of money to raise to make sure we can do these concerts at the standard that we want to be doing them, and while also servicing the community and doing a lot of commissioning and all that kind of back end stuff that we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to hear you talk about the process and sort of slowly going into a board and creating essentially a company around an ensemble. Yeah. That's not something you see it in some instances, yeah, but it does feel a little unusual. You know, you said if you did it nowadays, you'd probably just start straight at that process. What was some of the biggest benefits you saw when you made that sort of tick over into having a board and being a company and taking the ensemble in that direction? Was it the funding opportunities specifically?
Yeah, it's just funding. I mean, it just affects your capacity as a company in terms of money. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Like someone was asking me, they wanted to set up a festival, and I said, don't move to the board model unless you have to, because we started with a committee model.
Okay.
Because the board model comes from top down. Like it's something that the government has sort of put on arts companies of a certain level to say, well, if you want to get more secure funding, you need a board. So I don't personally think the board, because it's very much a business model, I don't think that really suits the way arts companies operate. And I think it can really get in the way. Like we talk about governance a lot, you know. I don't give a shit about governance, but we have to do it because we're a company. And so it's sort of like you don't want to set yourself unnecessarily up to the top tier of how you're operating unless you really have to, because it kind of takes the fun out and the, you know, flexibility out of it. Which on one level is great, you know, and we're at that point where, yeah, we needed that, and it's fine. And that's, you know, the reporting and everything, you do it. And the board meetings, you do it, but it's not fun. Like it's something that's serving a final product of, okay, well, this means that I can have a salary, I can have staff, we can have marketing, we can actually do this properly. That's what it's servicing. So in that sense, I think like if you were starting out, you wouldn't start out at that point because, you know, a group of like-minded individuals who are passionate about something can do so much, you know, and especially if you're at a point in your career where you don't need as much money. And I think that is a bit of an issue with the current generation of younger people, that they act like they think they need money. I mean, yeah, okay, if you want to move out, I guess you need money because you need to pay, you know, rent and stuff. But the thing is, like Uber Eats, you don't need to do Uber Eats. Like, you don't need to eat out all the time. I think everyone, their lives aren't simple enough. We grew up just really not having anything in terms of like what our expectations were. Like if we could afford a few beers after a concert, we were happy. So no one had this sense of, oh, I need to earn money. Otherwise, actually, we never would have gotten to this point because everyone was doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. And I sort of struggle when I'm giving advice now to younger people who want to start something like what we did, because it just will not get off the ground if everyone needs to be paid like optimum rates.
Yeah.
It's just never going to happen because the whole model does not pay for itself and it never will. So you need funding, and funding is hard to get. So, you know, it's this chicken and the egg. And I think I applaud people who just go for it, and, you know, which is what we did really, and just make stuff happen as much as you can, and, you know, live simply and just don't get ahead of yourself, because it's about the music and it's about like what you're going to learn through putting on concerts yourself, and that the act of doing that, you learn so much. So I don't know.
I'm with you. I'm really with you. I actually just got asked about my saxophone quartet recently because we were we want 5 credit points in first year. So we made a saxophone quartet for a chamber music program. And it's, 12 years and 2 albums, and, the alto and tenor player got married and had a baby, and, lots happened.
Great.
But, they said, well, how did you make the album? And like, oh, this is fantastic. And it's like, well, our tenor player learned how to be our producer and learned the recording techniques, and we produced it and recorded it all ourselves. He did that work for free for us while we were all teaching and while we we're all doing other jobs. And at one year I had a job at Smiggle, selling stationery, and it was that phase of our early 20s and sort of finishing uni and getting into the real world where we kind of just made things happen, and we figured out recording around all of our jobs because we just earned the money we could, and we figured it out. And, we didn't expect the album. We've never expected our albums to sort of fund anything as terms of our lifestyle. It's all about putting money back into the band kitty, the band piggy bank. That's then gone, oh, great, there's this opportunity. Look at this amazing venue. Let's fund a program, or let's fund a concert or something and get something off the ground. And, the young person that I was talking to, I mean, I say young as well. I'm not that old either, but I feel old sometimes. The person a little bit younger than me was saying, oh, like, I'm really surprised. And, yeah, I guess it was just a very different, already I'm feeling a bit of a generational shift from people coming through in their 20s and I'm in my 30s, where I guess we all look at the people above us and assume that, they've done something magical and we'll do something magical too. And it's like, no, we just love music. We just really wanted to play this crazy saxophone music, and we just made it happen. We just did it. Put some saxophones and made some crazy sounds and put on a concert at West End. Like, that was it.
Totally.
So one of the other things too, I was really curious about. Oh, I'm so sorry. Would you like to take a break for some water? Or
no, it's fine.
Oh, okay. So one of the things I was curious about with talking to someone who's so involved in chamber music is the dynamics of what rehearsals are like. So I think it's really fascinating when people aren't really aware of what it's like. They see a fabulous string quartet or chamber ensemble or whatever on stage, those sort of people coming together like that is such a different model of playing music. And I'd love to hear a little bit about what Ensemble Offspring is like in rehearsals and behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, it has been a work in progress up into to a certain point, and then now, you know, I think mean kind of average that people have been with the group is about 12 years. So it's a long time of playing with the same people, and so the good thing about that is that you find this kind of like way of working where, you know, it was always. I mean, the way I saw it was if I was going to be working my butt off to get money to make concerts happen, and I was called the artistic director, even though I wasn't really getting any money for it, then I had the right to lead rehearsals, because that's why I was doing it, because I wanted to be involved in that way. And, you know, we had some issues over the years with various people who would try and take over, and I never enjoyed that, because not that I'm an autocrat, but I am the leader of my ensemble, and I'm a leader in my personality as well, I guess. You know, you have people who want to do that and people who don't want to do that, and that's fine. So I think if we had too many people in the ensemble, or at certain times where maybe we did, who all wanted to lead, that can be really problematic. So it works really well now, because it's this, well, Claire's the leader, she's the artistic director, she basically chooses all the repertoire. I mean, I run it past people, but they trust me and they trust my taste, and I count in, for example, where normally maybe that would be the violinist's job.
Yeah.
But that's how we do it. And they say what they think, if, you know, they give input, but the thing is someone has to make the kind of like final say to keep things moving. And I'm very, you know, we're all time poor, so you've just got to keep moving in rehearsals. And so I'll just be like, okay, so you think that, then that, we're doing this, taking on board what everyone thinks. And that's just how we work, and it sort of works. Like, very rarely do we get into situations where, you know, if it ever happens, it's me and Jason Noble, the clarinetist, who have a kind of like standoff about something that he just digs his heels in about, and I totally disagree. But it happens literally like once a year, very, very rarely. Okay. So, yeah, I feel really supported by them, and we're all very good friends as well. And sometimes that would be hard, right, if you didn't work together well or respect each other as players. But for us, it really does work, and we just have so much fun together. Like, if someone comes into our rehearsals, I'm often embarrassed because we laugh so much and we're very silly, because also we're often playing, like, let's be honest, pretty crap music that we didn't know what it was going to be. And so you have to have a sense of humor about it. Like, you just have to. Otherwise, you really would slit your wrist. Like, that's how depressing it is sometimes on a musical level, because we're playing pieces by everyone, like someone who just has never really composed before, and people trying out new things, whatever, people without great skills. I don't know. But, you know, our role is to just be the conduit for making it as good as it can be, and also making sure that they understand maybe how to make it better next time, or fix what they can now. But it's kind of, it can be really soul destroying. So we have to have a very good sense of humor about it. And we do.
Lots of laughter in rehearsals then.
Yeah.
And so with Ensemble Offspring, where are you guys headed for the rest of 2023?
Oh my God. I thought you were going to ask me like more long term, because I just finished our 25 to 28 strategic plan.
Feel free to add that in.
And then 24 and 25 artistic plan for the Australia Council. So that is, you know, they force you to look ahead.
Yeah.
Which at the time of doing it, you're like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. But actually, of course, it's a good but yet difficult process. So I've just finished that. So it's some exciting plans like next year and the year after. But this year is just freaking insane. Like, we're all just going, what the hell were we thinking? I've had quite a few concertos this year, and I'm about to do my last one with the TSO. Oh, I've got one more at the end of the year. But so that's a relief. And I've got like one more Musica Viva, like solo recital kind of series, and then otherwise it's just Ensemble Offspring. And we're so busy. We're going to Europe in the second half of September. We've got our big Utsenroom concert at the end of August, and then we've just got like we're doing the Merlin Meyer. Brenda Gifford won that this year, so we're going down to MRC to do that in November, and then we're going back down to Melbourne to do our Lone Hemispheres solo series. Yeah. That's all new commissions as well. So, and then Hatched Academy, that's still coming, and also the final Naraboria concert. So,
oh my gosh,
it's a bit scary. Like when we look in our diaries, we're just like, whoa, this is bad. Yeah.
How on earth do you find time to rehearse everything with a schedule like that?
It's tough because also we're playing so much, a variety of music. I mean, our Songbirds program, we play that often, and that's fine because that's sort of in the bag. That looks after itself, which is good. But then all the new stuff, yeah, there's a lot. And it is really hard to fit it in sometimes when other people have other things on as well, of course. And you know what it's like when you're a musician and trying to organise rehearsals with busy people.
Yeah, it's a juggle.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, wow. Well, look, Claire, could we finish off? I've got 3 questions that I've been asking everybody in their interviews, so I'm excited to see what your answers are. So the first one is, what advice do you have for young people looking to get into the music industry?
Well, I mean, hopefully I already touched on that. But I mean, getting into the music industry, that's a very general kind of question, isn't it? But I would say more specifically, like if you were a classically trained musician, I would say practice as much as you can when you're in an institution. Okay. And before you have kids and before you have like financial responsibilities, just practice. And also use your ears. Don't turn them off, because it's amazing how few people do listen to themselves when they're practicing. And make it really about like that time to get as good as you can, because you will never have that much time again in your life. So that would be like my big tip, because I think a lot of people end up teaching and not performing because they kind of like didn't get to that point, but then the teaching means that they don't have time to practice anymore, or whatever the work is that they're doing. And it's this, again, chicken and egg, and then you can't get to the level that you need to. So I always prioritize like my playing, and I studied overseas and did postgraduate studies because I would practice. I've just practiced for 7 or 8 hours a day. And that means that now I don't have to practice as much because I set myself up really well. And that's really important for what I do, because I just play so much repertoire and I need to be at that level.
Yes, I think that's really fabulous advice. That's really good. The second question is, what don't you think people know about a life in the classical music world?
I mean, I guess it depends who those people are, doesn't it? But most people think that it's sort of glamorous, I guess, or especially my life, because I get to do concertos and, you know, travel and fun things. It is fun. It's really fun and I love it, but it's not glamorous. And like, we're here at the Australian Festival of Chamber Music this week with some of the best musicians in the world, like a lot of people from England who are just, they're phenomenal. Like what the pianist who just left today, he's Stephen Islis's pianist. So like they're like top tier musicians. And we're all staying in this like reasonably crappy hotel that gets serviced like once a week. And they're here for like 2 weeks and no one has time to do their washing. And we certainly don't have like servants who are helping us with any of that stuff. I didn't even have time to go to Woolworths for the first like 48 hours and I was starving. I'm often don't have time to eat. You know, like it's just, it's really not glamorous.
I think that's some good insight there.
Yeah.
And finally, the last question is, if you had your time over, would you do it all again? Your career, everything that you've been doing?
Oh, that question makes me cry because the actual answer, I feel a bit teary. Yes, like 100%, everything. Yes. Nothing, not one single thing different.
Oh, amazing.
I just feel so fortunate and, I mean, I did it. I made it happen, but at the same time, I had all these amazing opportunities, and I have been lucky, and I want to give that back now. That's something that's really important to me. So no, I would not change a thing.
Oh, wow. Look, Claire, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so excited to share this episode with the world, and just thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, Emma.